So maybe with that, we can talk about Ee.Ma.Yau. It begins almost in a complete opposite way from Jolly-Katu, because where Jolly-Katu begins with this super snappy, super quick montage, with Ee.Ma.Yau, we have a single shot that simultaneously, for me,
this is during the credits.
Yeah, it simultaneously evokes both Tarkovsky and Fellini, and probably Bergman as well, all at once. Because you just have a beach, basically a shore, a seaside. You hear the sound of the waters, and there's a single tree, and I think it's a dead tree. Then you begin to hear some music, and it's like, it's what I would associate with like a kind of marching band type music, but it's
have like a dirge.
Yeah, well, it's clear. It's a funeral procession. It becomes clear.
Yeah.
As it enters the frame.
Procession.
Yes, it's a big funeral procession with all these people, and but the music is a little off. I mean, it sounds off. It sounds like something's out of tune.
Right.
I found myself referencing it throughout the film, because at a certain point, the young man, again, this film is about a son who has to arrange for the funeral of his father.
Right.
But at the beginning of the film, we have a conversation between the son and father as they're sort of sharing drinks together and getting a little rowdy. The son basically promises to give him a really spectacular.
The father was talking about, I think it was his grandfather or his own father or his father-in-law, somebody older person's funeral that he had attended that was so magnificent and had the band and all of this stuff. So and his son was like, I'm going to do even better for you.
Yeah. So his son promises, this really amazing funeral.
We haven't explained the title of this one yet.
Yes.
Ee.Ma.Yau. Ee.Ma.Yau, if you look on the subtitled version on YouTube, it translates it as R.I.P., which I think kind of does it a disservice, but that's like they were trying to translate that to a Western audience, I guess. But it's basically, it's like our JMJ, actually, in that it's the first like syllables of their name for Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, but it's a prayer traditionally like whispered into the ear of a dead person.
Wow.
Like when they're like lying in state or whatever.
Wow, that's amazing.
So if you, right after the character dies in this film, you hear them like wailing like Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Oh, wow.
The women.
Interesting. Interesting.
So that's the reference of the title. Yeah.
Well, that was one thing.
Which is why I assumed the director was Catholic at first.
Yeah. Sure. Well, maybe he was raised Catholic.
He might have. He just said Christian, but I don't know.
Sure. And I think it's clear that he's working within and out of a Christian moral sense.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that, say, like a series like Breaking Bad might be like working from within that kind of a moral a moral sense that's alive to certain realities because of its sort of Christian background,
Right.
But one thing that I found myself looking up trying to figure out was these women mourning. Like if it was a cultural thing to just go like super over the top. Oh my gosh.
It was like so grating.
I know.
That's another element of sound in that movie. It's just like
great.
the constant
good.
wailing.
It's
and like
so good.
The wife it's like the wife, she's addressing her husband as he's dead for hours and she's like berating him as he lies there dead.
I think it is clear, not knowing it exactly whether this is a cultural phenomenon. I think it does seem clear within the film itself that this is just a cultural expectation.
Right.
That again, what I know of Indian culture is like of Hindu culture, women throwing themselves on the funeral pyre of their husband. This might be a kind of, devolution of that, which is that the women are expected to stay by the body and just mourn. But what's great about it from the film, as far as the film is concerned, is that it creates this soundscape that just grates on you.
Does.
And it grates on the characters. And this character played by the same actor who plays the head butcher in Jolly-Katu.
Yeah, the actor's name is Chemban Vinod Jose, and he is a frequent collaborator and sometimes even co-screenwriter with
I see. Well, I really liked him.
Yes,
I really liked him in Jolly-Katu, and I liked him even more in Ee.Ma.Yau. There's something that's so sympathetic about him, but also, he's like this big burly guy, right. You know, he can get really angry, he can really throw his weight around, right. And yet,
but not a typical movie star, even in India.
Oh,
right?
totally, yeah.
Normal looking,
but you really feel for this guy's plight. You know, he kind of strikes you as almost like a sensitive giant. You know, I won't say gentle giant because he can definitely be rough, but where was I going with this?
He's someone who clearly has tender feeling towards his father, as we see in their interactions at the beginning of the film.
But, this film, basically all of the events, nothing goes according to plan. Yeah. And it's all very stressful for him. Right. And then add to that this incessant wailing. Yeah. Just it and that's not the only thing, but there's a lot of sort of factors that are sort of feeding into driving this guy to the edge.
Yeah, well, I think one thing he does really well in both of these films, Jallikattu and Ee.Ma.Yau, is he's very attentive to the way people's like small faults are amplified in these stressful situations. Yes. I mean, some of them might not be small faults, but we see that in Jallikattu, right? Like we get a sense of people's characters, and then like that leading to like the various ways in which they all go nuts in the course of the story. That happens here too. I mean, the father himself is kind of a dirtbag. He's off away from his family a lot. We find out that he has like a second family on some island, and later on they come and interrupt the funeral. That creates the most chaos because the woman is trying to mourn him. His other woman is. It's comically horrible.
It's amazing, yeah.
And he makes this promise he can't keep, and he's making stupid decisions like, trying to buy a coffin that's way too expensive. Yeah. And he wants to get the bishop there for the funeral. That's interesting too, because like a lot of the people in the movies it's in a Catholic background, but they're clearly kind of like cultural Catholics, right? You know? So it's like a sign of prestige. Yeah, we're gonna get the bishop at the funeral. And
you mentioned this moment before the father dies where he kind of has this vision in the trees. There are a couple of other of these sort of uncanny or supernatural gestures in the film where, first off, the circumstances of his death are very mysterious. Right. And that's part of the story of the film is different people in the village suspecting different things and trying to figure out how he died. But then at a certain point, the gravedigger just keels over and dies.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and again, it's just
he dies in the grave he was digging for the guy. So they find him lying in the grave that he was digging for the other guy.
Yes, and at the end of the film, we get this brief kind of epilogue with the gravedigger and his dog and the father and his duck standing on the shore with two other cloaked figures waiting for these boats to come and, presumably... Yes,
and I heard this compared to like a very Seventh Seal, Ingmar Bergman kind of...
Yes. So there are these, as in Jallikattu, there are these kind of fantastic or uncanny elements that are being indicated here. Right. And I think the effect is to sort of draw us to, I think, a more universal implication, a more fundamental thing than just, the tragedy of this son not being able to pull off this funeral. I think that similar to Jallikattu, where you really have, a whole community struggling to control this force of nature. Here you have a son basically struggling against death, against the best laid plans of mice and men. He can't fulfill his promise,
and he is trying to fulfill an act of piety, natural piety, even though in this like flawed way.
Right. But this is a deep scandal, I think, to all of us when we realize we just can't do it on our own. Right. Right. And so there is something fundamental, something spiritual. Yeah. About this story.
These two films, Jallikattu and Ee.Ma.Yau, they came out next to each other in his filmography, and they feel like they go together pretty well. They're very stylistically different, but they have a very similar kind of pessimistic view of people, especially when they get together in groups, the chaos that emerges.
Well, I don't know about that. There's redeeming things in both films, and then especially in Ee.Ma.Yau, there are a lot of people in the community who, forgive this father who has died. There's no resentment,
That's true.
There's trying to help. He has a friend who tries to help him make these funeral arrangements.
That's true, but it's clear that he's not like operating with rose-colored glasses or sentimentality at all. I would say not despairing, but there's like a certain pessimism about like these group interactions. And
maybe pessimism is one way of putting it, or it's just a kind of realism,
right.
like a kind of dealing frankly with the serious problems that are present in human communities.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.